fellow Rotarians and honored guests. We have the privilege today of hearing from an organization that is rapidly influencing our province in a very positive way. And for that purpose, we have invited Christine Chilton as the Director of Communications for Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Manitoba office. And with her is Josh Dillabow. Josh, as you will hear later, is responsible for particularly this territory that we are on the border of. You'll hear more. And Tim Gompf comes from the Oak Plum Lake, and you will learn more about that as we begin. I would just say that I had the pleasure while living in Brandon in the 70s and early 80s to become acquainted with the situation in the Oak Plum Lake, and along with 3 or 4 others put together the organization that procured the first 55 acres that were obtained by the NCC, for the NCC, and one of its earliest projects in Manitoba. So I've always been interested in nature conservancy, and it's had just a rapid spread, as you will hear, across the country, and more funds being donated to preserve lands, nature lands, and you'll hear about that. And I welcome to the lectern Christine Chilton.
I'm going to take 2 seconds and get set up here.
Some of those blinds closed with that help here.
Get brighter.
Yeah, give the bulb a minute to warm up.
Warm up. There we go. There, I think we're good. So I wanted to thank you all so much for having us today. My name is Christine Chilton. I'm from the Nature Conservancy of Canada. I work out at the Winnipeg office, and as Mr. Cranes kindly explained, I'm the communications manager. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I loud enough? Excellent. With me we have Josh Dillabow. He is the Natural Area Coordinator for the Assiniboine Delta region, which comes right up against Neepawa here. And Tim Gompf is the Natural Area Coordinator for the Riding Mountain Natural Area, which also comes right up against Neepawa here. So you guys are, you're right in the middle of everything good. So, for those of you who don't know who we are, the Nature Conservancy of Canada is it's the nation's leading not-for-profit biodiversity conservation organization. That sounds difficult. So what that really means, in simple terms, is just that we work to make sure that the natural spaces across Canada and the species that live on them are protected, not just today and tomorrow, but in perpetuity. We work hard to make sure that the places that you experience will be there for your children, for your children's children, and down the road. Switch over.
You're not plugged in, Arnie.
Oh, it's not plugged in?
Oh, that makes a difference.
My husband says I'm loud enough, I don't know.
You're speaking to a large audience.
Ah,
That might work.
there we go. All right. So we manage lands and waters across Canada that are under our care for their natural value, but we also respect and promote nature's own process. So we try to find that balance between what nature does naturally and the best available science to help us keep things running as smoothly as it should be. Our goal is for our natural world to remain a home for wildlife, a haven for recreation, and a vital resource that cleans the air we breathe and the water we drink. Through strong partnerships, we work to protect our natural areas so children and grandchildren have a chance to enjoy them. As mentioned, the town of Neepawa is quite lucky because you are right in the middle of two natural areas. And, the gentleman here will enlighten you a little bit on that as we go. To take a step back, this is a photo of our founding members. They came together about 55 years ago because they were concerned, they're all biologists, and they were concerned that a lot of the special places that they had enjoyed as they were growing up they were losing them, and they weren't going to be there for future generations. So they decided that it was time to take action. The gentleman who appears to be sort of tugging on his ear there, his name is Bruce Falls. He also, about a year ago, just received the Order of Canada. So it's a great group of people, and we have really stuck to their beliefs and their foundation, which is what has kept us consistent for the last 55 years, and that's what has given us a lot of our foundational pieces. So here in Manitoba, it's been about 40 years since our first acquisition in Manitoba, which was in 1977. Since then, we've conserved and protected more than 63,000 acres across 9 natural areas. So in 40 years, that's a pretty good sense of work, but we still have things that we need to do. Nationally speaking, in 55 years, we have conserved 2.8 million acres from coast to coast, and we have done that through 1,100 properties. This has all been done thanks to the donations and the work of our partners and donors, and for that, we are incredibly, incredibly grateful. Here you'll see our mission statement. So our mission here is to conserve the important natural areas and their biological diversity across Canada. We do this not only by our science and on-the-ground work, but by leading and trying to inspire others to join us. We do this all with the aim of creating a legacy for future generations of Canadians. We go about doing this through our 3 core activities, which are science, securement, and stewardship. Those are the things that base all of our work. So through science, NCC's work is led by a team of conservation science professionals. They identify, plan, and execute the protection of the best of Canada's natural spaces. So we work in very specific areas that are most endangered. So instead of kind of being all over the map, we really focus our work on where it's needed the most, and that is based off of science. We do our securement through, we have a whole bunch of tools in our toolbox for securement. We do land donations, we do land purchase, and we also do conservation easements. Again, all possible through partners and all levels of government, industry, and everybody else that we work with. For our stewardship work, we have something called a stewardship endowment fund. So what we do is when we purchase a property, a portion of money must go into a stewardship endowment fund, and we must prove that we can care for that property as we go forward. So this way we are being fiscally responsible as well as environmentally responsible, and that is something that really resonates with our donors and the people that choose to work with us. Through our stewardship activities, we do things such as prescribed grazing, we do prescribed fires, invasive species a lot of times will be coming in, so we will try to control the invasive species and remove them whenever possible. And we also do things such as wetland or prairie restoration, trying to keep things in their intrinsic natural state. So what you have here is a map. I'm not sure if everybody can see that, but if you look at these little yellow dots, those are all of the properties from 1962 to 2012 that the Nature Conservancy had done in those years across Canada. What we then jump to here is the orange dots, which show what we had done from 2013 to 2016. So as we've been progressing and as we've been growing and really sort of learning how to do what we do best, since 2013 we have concluded another 267 projects. So that's just in the last couple of years across Canada. If we zone in a little bit closer into Manitoba. Here in Manitoba, up until 2013, we had conserved 54,000 acres. You can see those are the yellow dots right in there in our 9 natural areas. Today, we have conserved just over 63,000 acres and just over 200 conservation projects. So those are all of the pieces that we focused on in our natural areas. We have 9 natural areas across the province. We started off in Tallgrass Prairie, which you can see down here, and Riding Mountain. Those are our two first areas that we've decided to work in. And since then, our most recent ones have been the Interlake and Assiniboine Delta. So all of those areas will have pieces that will be the most at threat, which is why we work mostly in the south at this point, is because that's where we will have most of the urbanization and most of our natural areas will come under threat, is further in the south end of the province. What we do for these is we come up with our science team. They sort of come up with a plan and they say these areas are under threat. They then come up with what are the main species that we want to protect, why do we want to protect it, and how do we go about that, so that everything we do is planned out. It's not, when we come up with what we can call a natural area conservation plan, we know ahead of time what our goals are, what we're working towards, and why we're doing it. So everything is planned out very systemically, and it allows us to work well within our means. Here in Manitoba, we have been fortunate enough, we have natural areas that include the sandhill prairies and parklands in southwestern Manitoba. We have some globally significant wetlands and riparian areas. We have the boreal transition of the Riding Mountain and Northern Interlake. And we have prairie grasslands, which we include tallgrass prairie, fescue prairie, sandhill, and mixed grass prairie. So here you'll see the Yellowquill property, that is in Assiniboine Delta. Blue Wing Wetlands is up in Riding Mountain, as is Elk Glen. And then the Glenlawn property is a little down more towards Stewart Burn, Vida, in the tallgrass prairie. As some of you may be aware, temperate grasslands are the most endangered ecosystem in the world. So people think often about rainforests and all of these other ecosystems, but what they don't realize is that it's actually much, much closer to home. So in Canada alone, 70% of prairie grasslands have already been lost, and we're losing another 2 to 3% per year. These grasslands support rare species, bird migration, as well as the agricultural communities. So not only do they have a natural value, but they also have an economic value to the communities that are around them. So one of the important things that we look at when we look at grasslands is how we're going to work in the communities, how we're going to work with some of the locals, and how to best partner for conservation. Of course, we also work in wetlands and riparian areas. 70% of wetlands have been lost across Prairie Canada so far. So we would like to conserve additional acres that support wetlands. So that would include things such as marshes, swamps, and potholes. And those contribute to the conservation of waterfall habitat and riparian areas that would flow down through lakes and rivers and streams and down. Of course, we also have the parkland boreal transition, which would be sort of the Riding Mountain area up this way. So this is an area that has high biodiversity due to it's got meshing of several ecozones. So it would support native grasslands, deciduous forests, which would also be found in eastern Manitoba, as well as a lot of boreal forest species. And then we switch over to not only looking at the landscapes, but also a lot of these species that would live in these landscapes. So particularly endangered species. So, you know, what species are in trouble, what do we have to work towards? So those would include things such as the Powesheik skipperling, the western prairie fringed orchid, the chestnut-colored longspur, as well as Manitoba's only skink, the prairie skink. Powsheek skipperling, only found in Manitoba in the tall grass prairie regions. We are averaging less than 50 found per year. They used to be so abundant that people did not, they didn't even pay attention to them, and they have now dwindled so drastically. They are one of the species that we look towards when we work with partnerships. So we work with cross-border partnerships to look at the Nature Conservancy US to see what they're trying to do. We're trying to bring in the best available science to find out what has caused the decline of this species. Again, when we think about local versus globally, the Powsheek skipperling is rarer than a panda, right? So everybody knows about the panda, everybody wants to save the panda, but how do we bring attention to the things that are right here in our backyard? The Western Prairie Fringed Orchid, last year we were able to announce that the Nature Conservancy, through our conservation projects, had conserved habitat for more than 50% of the Western Prairie Fringed Orchids in Canada. And since half of the world's population of the orchid is here, that means that we had secured habitat for more than 25% of the global population of this orchid. So, you know, those are things that make a really, really big difference as we move forward. So in spite of all of the work that we have done so far, we know that there's still a lot to do. Landscapes are under threat, we have habitat loss, fragmentation, we have climate change, we have species decline and extinction, we have invasive species, and we have a really growing disconnect from our natural world. We have people who are not quite as aware of what's in their own backyard as they used to be. This impacts negatively on our lives, it impacts negatively on our communities, and the economic well-being of ourselves. So the future rests on what we do today. So through the Nature Conservancy of Canada, what we are saying is that we must do more, we must do it better, and we need to do it faster. We have just launched the largest campaign for conservation in Canadian history, where we will be raising $750 million across Canada to conserve, connect, and inspire. Over half of that money will be from individuals, families, foundations, and corporations, and we are well on our way to getting there already. In Manitoba, when we discuss how we will conserve, our current campaign has a target of 40,000 acres secured, in addition to our over 63 already, which in Manitoba alone would put us at just over 100,000 acres. And we would do that through at least 50 conservation projects across the province. Connect is something that we are really wanting to pay attention to as we move forward. So how are we connecting Canadians and Manitobans to the landscape around them? So we believe that having things like Manitobans spend more time outdoors will increase their appreciation for it, and that, of course, makes our work quite a bit easier. We do things such as we call them conservation volunteer events. So we invite people to come out, and they can, sometimes they pull fences, sometimes they do bird counts, sometimes they lay skink boards. There's all sorts of different varieties and different ability levels. We often work with school groups as well. Out in the tall grass prairie, we have a interpretive center, and that will be one of nature destinations. That's something that nationally is going to be coming across the board. So in Manitoba, we have highlighted 13 properties that we are encouraging people to come out and experience a variety of systems across Manitoba. We're also working on sort of branching out a little bit, right? It's really nice for us to say, come out and experience that, but we fully realize that that's not always possible. We also realize that we have to go in for a different demographic. So what we did last year was, I think everybody knows the Google cars that drive around and they take pictures and they map your city, and when you want to find where you're going, you log on to Google Maps and it'll show you the way. And So what we did was, it's called the Google Trekker project. So we picked 2 projects, one in Riding Mountain, we picked another one just near St. Lazare. And we hiked for several days with this camera on our back. It has 18 cameras on it that take a picture every second, 1.2 seconds. And what will happen is the images all go back to Google, and Google will pull together technology that will allow people to log in, just like they would when you're doing Google Maps, but they'll allow you to experience some of the natural places across Manitoba. So for people who may find it a little bit more difficult to get out, or they're not sure if they do really want to enjoy it, this will give them the opportunity to see what we have to offer quite simply. Inspire, this is one of our interns. She was with us last year. Her name is Sydney. This I believe was taken out near Riding Mountain. But what we want to do is we hire interns every year. We want to work with the next generation of environmentalists and scientists that are coming forward. So what we want to do is we want to double the number of interns that we hire every year. Right now we average about 6 per year. So we want to double that. We want to get more people out there working in the field, caring about their communities, and providing us with the best possible direction. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn you over to Tim. Tim's going to talk to you a little bit about the Riding Mountain Natural Area. As I mentioned, Neepawa was quite fortunate because you butt up. Here we go. So here we've got up into Riding Mountain, and then Josh will step in and he'll tell you a little bit about how you work down into Neepawa or into Assiniboine Delta, and then we can answer any questions that you have from there. Tim.
This will be kind of short and sweet. I'm kind of a rookie at this. I've only been here for 3 months now, so I'm just going to start with the NCC. Riding Mountain area, as Christine was pointing out, you guys are down here. It stretches over Rossburn, up to Russell, takes a little dive down, takes in Bernal, goes up the Saskatchewan border to the, I guess it's the Duck Mountain Provincial Forest, comes across over to Dauphin Lake, and then down this side again, back over to Neepawa. And smack dab in the middle, of course, is Riding Mountain National Park. Riding Mountain area, it's actually one of the last remaining ecological, big word, ecologically functional landscapes in the Aspen Parkland. It's one of only 18 biosphere reserves in Canada. As Christine said before, there's quite a range of biodiversity in that area, in this area. Boreal forests, fescue prairies, aspen parklands. There's quite a few endangered species that can be found in this, well, if you can find them, kind of thing. Baird sparrow, Sprague's pipit are a couple of small birds that are on that list. What else can I say? This area, especially in the south, well, I guess before she said something about the Blue Wing area, I think that's a stretch up in here. And over in through here, it's one of the most significant waterfowl areas in Manitoba. It's a great nesting area. It's also home to elk, moose, bear, deer, wolves, pretty much anything you can think of that animals you can see around the park. What else can I talk to you? Move this ahead one. Is that the one? Yeah. Something else I'll just maybe touch on a bit. NCC, along with our conserving lands and things, we've got 37 in the Riding Mountain area. We've got 37 fee simple purchases. That's lands that NCC owns. On those lands, we have 17 grazing, 9 cultivation, and 15 hang agreements with people that sometimes it's if we bought the land off of them, they'll keep on grazing it or haying it, or to a certain extent the cultivation. The cultivation sometimes we give them a 3 or a 4 year lease on it, and the plan is to get it back to grassland cover so that we can, even though it's not going to be native pasture or cover again, it's grassland, which is better than straight out cultivation in our eyes. So along with the conservation end, but we're still dealing a little bit with agriculture, because sometimes some of these pastures that are being grazed, and the cultivation, when we turn it back into a haying situation for a few years, we'll turn around and then graze that, because way back when there was herds of bison running across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, the grazing actually helped the habitat. And of course we don't have the bison, but we can put cattle on and get close to the same effect with the grazing. We also have 59 conservation agreements in the Rocky Mountain area. Those conservation agreements are landowners, they'll agree to put conservation, I hate to use the word restrictions, but kind of restrictions on land where they'll agree to no breaking or no draining it or clearing bush, stuff like that. And as a rule, these conservation agreements are in perpetuity, so that if it's set up now with these agreements, your grandkids, your great-grandkids will still be able to see that land as it is now. It won't be broke up, turned into a campground or something. It should stay natural the way it is. And I think that's about all I've got to say.
Okay, so I get to talk to you about the lovely Siboney Delta natural area. This is our newest natural area, and much like Christine and Tim had said before, Neepawa is up at the top. So
Can I get you to speak into the mic?
okay, sorry, I move and stuff like that. It's hard for me to stay stationary, but I'll do my best. For this particular natural area, you know, there's, being so new for us, there's so much that we would like to do within here whenever it comes to conservation. But to highlight the individual area, you know, if you think about this, this is just a line. And to a lot of people, what's just a line? You know, I can tell you that it's 580,000 hectares for people who are more on the old standard system. That's 1.5 million acres, like this whole area encompasses. And from that, it's one of those rare areas that has an aquifer in it within Manitoba. And this, our natural area plan for here, includes what we call our first human being wild target. So you've heard about the species at risk, you've heard about the natural spaces and everything like that. But specifically within this area, we find it a high value to protect these natural landscapes for the people of the area. The people of the area draw from the aquifer, and in order for the aquifer to work appropriately or healthily, it needs natural spaces and natural areas to filter out that water, to allow that groundwater to seep in. So not only are we protecting the area within that and the species within that for the species and the intrinsic value in themselves, but we're also protecting it for the residents and also the agricultural community within the area. As you all know, big potato growing industry within this area, center pivots, all that kind of good stuff. If there is too much draw on the aquifer, or if there is not enough areas that allow recharge for the aquifer, not only does it affect your neighbors, but it also affects the local economy within this area. So that's our kind of first step into the social science world of trying to help other people as well as the intrinsic value of the species on the land. So why Neepawa is kind of the meeting point. You probably all know about the Arden Ridge. You can see it just directly kind of in the shade here of the darker green trees. It is part of the old Manitoba escarpment, whenever there used to be a lake out there. It holds a variety, a suite of species that are very rare within Manitoba. The springs out of the side hill collect a special suite of species called monkey flowers, or also there's sea monkey flowers. So as these waters run through in these special areas only, and it's an area I'm talking about is maybe the size of this table, where spring will pop out of the side hills, and these flowers are only found within this particular area. They only grow there, and they're so interesting in the fact that there could be a spring here, and they only grow around here, and there's a spring at the back of the room, and there's, it's only about that big, and they'll only grow around that. How they got there, we don't know, but it's one of those rare species that just they're so specific to those special areas. So those are the areas that we're trying to protect. Obviously within this area too, it takes in a lot of the sandhill areas because of the potatoes and stuff like that. So we have our sandhill prairie, our prairie skink, Manitoba's only lizard. We also have a specific grassland type that is only found within those areas, and a whole suite of species. We've even got cactuses in Manitoba that I'm sure a lot of you, if you've been hiking in the area and sat down in the wrong spot, you found out the hard way. We've had a few interns that have found out the hard way that there are cactuses in Manitoba. And it actually sneaks into the Brandon area. And the reason why it sneaks forward into the Brandon area is just east of Brandon. We call it the Shiloh Plains area, but this is one of the last connecting large grassland blocks towards CFB Shiloh. So you will find birds here that are severely declining. We call them grassland birds. You saw a picture earlier, the chestnut-colored longspur. They require these wide open grassland spaces, and as these grasslands get divided up and chunked up, the birds leave. They can't handle the stress of other people coming into their area. So it's one of those things where we're trying to work in that area to be able to protect those. One major accomplishment, and this was actually before this specific natural area was set up, was what we call our Yellowfoot property, and purchased back in the 90s. Before this was done, it was right around 1,800 acres, and we worked with Manitoba Agriculture. We worked with the province in various ways to set up a specialized grazing project down there, so that we are not only fulfilling our needs to the province, because we also lease some special crown ag lease or special crown lands out there, so that we can protect the birds and protect all the other species. So, as Tim mentioned earlier, the bison aren't here anymore. The effects of Mother Nature we are seeing much more drastically, and Manitoba itself was developed on what we call a disturbance-based system. So we had the bison come through, we had large fires come through. Our system was always in flux as a result of these disturbances, we call them. We're trying to do our best to work like Mother Nature. So we're trying to provide disturbance on the landscape at an appropriate scale for these properties, because we're not just a fence and forget it kind of organization. So like Christine mentioned, any property we purchase, we also manage. And we also put away, like she mentioned earlier, a specific amount of money to make sure that those properties are managed going forward. Because if we were just a fence it and forget it type organization, the minute that we bought a property, it would no longer be of biodiversity value for us, because those species wouldn't be able to stay there without that small, appropriate type of disturbance. So that's why we kind of do that. So going back to the Yellowfoot, sorry, I'm jumping around here. Within that, we worked with the Manitoba Agriculture, Manitoba, there's sustainable development now. They used to be conservation water stewardship. I don't know, they have changed their name so quickly now that it's hard to follow. And we have a local producer. And what we're trying to do there is mimic Mother Nature. And so in the past, we've had goats out there trying to do things. There's a somewhat resident feral herd of bison that are out there trying to do their job. We have elk all across the property. We have white-tailed deer. It's an absolute amazing place. So what we try and do is make sure it stays that way. And that's kind of our goal and mission. So I think I have a picture of, so this particular picture is in the Spruce Woods Provincial Park. So as you can see, it's got that sandy rolling feature, so the old sandy beach ridges that, happen to be across. And the interesting thing about this and how Neepawa links up so well is Neepawa's right in the middle of that boreal transition zone. So down here in, I'm just going to go back. Down here in the Spruce Woods area, why it's called Spruce Woods is it has glacial relic white spruce trees. And as you can see by the edge of the line, the only way they got down there was from the tip of Riding Mountain. So the tip of Riding Mountain was here. Spruce trees obviously migrated down through there during the glacial period. And those spruce trees only occur within that area. We have Colorado blue spruce that are planted and everything like that, but the large white spruce that is only found in Sprucewood Provincial Park and the surrounding area, it moved in there at the glacial time, and they are found in no other part of Manitoba whenever it comes to our sandy soils and stuff like that. So just to, I guess, wrap things up. So as we're talking to you today and hoping to work with the Rotary Club more, we feel that Canada has an opportunity that most countries have already lost. We still have the expanse of natural beauty, grasslands, our boreal transition areas, and we owe it to our province, our country, and the world to protect it before it's all gone. So we work to give back to this community, our greater global community, as well as Canadians and Manitoba. We give back to them and to our country because they've given us so much. So we hope you'll join us for our time for nature. Anybody has any questions? I guess if that's appropriate, Wayne, feel free, and you can identify who you'd like to ask it to.
How big of areas do you like to get in a walk to conserve?
I guess from one thing we didn't talk about in the presentation is within our natural areas, we have what we call parcel prioritization. So there is, within the conservation community, there's a big argument. Do you go with small chunks spread out across the landscape, or do you go with single large chunks like national parks and stuff like that? Because we are not a provincial government that can, or federal government that can tie up those large blocks. We say our smallest project we'll do is 40 acres, and I don't know what our largest project. I know what was Darkwoods. Darkwoods, we bought a mountain range. The BC region bought a mountain I forget which mountain range. Is it the Selkirks? I'm not 100% sure, but they basically bought a mountain. So in Manitoba, the smallest area that we work to protect is 40 acres because within its own intrinsic value, it's worth it. And from a large scale, I don't know if anybody's come forward with a big enough project that we haven't been able to do yet. So.
What are the places in these two regions that we can visit to just experience?
Well, I think locally that you can visit. There's the trail that's within the just on the north side of the community pasture for the Simcoe Delta area. Yeah,
Langford Trail.
Yeah, so there's the Langford Trail that will give you a good example of that rolling sandy kind of topography on the edge of the escarpment. Up within Riding Mountain, obviously there's the national park. Whenever it comes to NCC specific projects, our Yellow Quill and our Elk Glen property, which is more towards Rossburn. Yellow Quill is just south and west of Shiloh, or south and east of Shiloh, sorry, would be NCC properties that people could go and visit. They're part of our destination for Canadians that anybody can visit. It's just one of those things. Give us a phone call.
Are they listed on your website?
Currently, are they listed?
They are, our nature destinations are being put up on the website. So what we have right now, we do have several listed that say come visit us. And what we just encourage people to do is to call ahead of time. So Because we allow things like hunting on some of our properties and stuff like that, we want to make sure that people are going out at the safest and most appropriate time for everybody. But yeah, those are some of them. So Elton Glen is one of the ones that you can also visit virtually by this year. It'll be there. You can take a look around a bunch of properties.
What's going to happen to the moose in the Spruce Woods?
The moose in Spruce Woods?
Yeah.
From
I understand they're a relic population. Is that correct?
Yeah, you would be correct in that there are a relic population.
2 years ago, they tried to bring some bulls down from Riding Mountain, and they figured it would ruin the relic population, but now they're down to, what, 26 moose or something in there.
From the standpoint of large mammals within the kind of Spruce Woods area, the province does the management for a lot of large mobile mammals within that area. NCC itself, from a standpoint of moving animals or trying to supplement populations, we've tended to shy away from that. Our more focus has been from a landscape scale. So basically it's one of those things where we protect the habitat for the moose to be in, and we'll let the province worry about the actual individual populations, and they can move animals in to supplement populations and stuff like that. Moving large game, and there are specific organizations, but there are permits, and there are a large amount of red tape that NCC would have to go into to do that. However, like I said, we more focus on the landscape scale, where it's if the property's there or if the habitat's there, we wish to protect them. Not saying we don't care about the moose, but there are certain limitations within our organization.
So you don't know about the hognose snake then, either?
Well, we do know that the hognose snake is present within the area. Its current status is being reviewed right now by the Council of Endangered Species, and they have a recovery team that NCC is a part of. Currently, population size estimates, we don't have good enough science right now in Manitoba. Dr. Pamela Rutherford, who works with the Brandon University, is working to create, I think she's using genetics, I'm not 100% sure, so please don't quote me on this, but I think she's trying to get a population estimate via genetic sample. So basically they take the genetics and they can kind of map out what the current population size is. But whether or not she's found a student to do that, I'm not 100% sure, but that's the way it kind of sounded. And the recovery team and recovery strategy will estimate population size, and then they'll also put forward recommendations on how to protect species. So.
I think just in the interest of time, we should we'll wrap it up from there. And Christine and Tim, can I have you come forward to the club, please, just by Josh? So Christine and Tim and Josh, on behalf of the Neepawa Rotary Club, thank you very much for coming and giving us your presentation. An excellent PowerPoint presentation. You outlined your goals and your priorities and your ecosystems in Manitoba very, very well, and we really appreciate you taking the time. I just wanted to just give you a pen on behalf of Neepawa Rotary, and thanks for coming out and being part of our meeting today. So once again, thank you.
Thank you.